The humid embrace of the morning air clung thick and heavy over Oak Ridge Estates. It was a subdivision sculpted from aspirations of suburban perfection, yet beneath the manicured lawns and freshly painted shutters, belonging often felt less like a shared ideal and more like a relentless competition, refereed with iron-fisted vigilance by Janice Pritchard. Janice, treasurer of the Homeowners Association, was a woman whose sharp features seemed permanently fixed in a state of pursed disapproval. She moved through the neighborhood like a self-appointed sentinel, the guardian of Oak Ridge's aesthetic and behavioral codex. Her diligence was the stuff of local legend, her interpretation of the HOA bylaws, absolute and unyielding. To the residents who exchanged knowing glances and whispered her nickname behind cupped hands, Karen. She was a harbinger of violation notices, a dispenser of unsolicited advice delivered with the unwavering conviction of someone who believed, deep in her bones, that she was always, unequivocally, right. Her patrols were unpredictable, tactical maneuvers in maintaining order. Sometimes she'd glide by in her aging, meticulously clean sedan, its engine a low hum against the quiet streets. Other times, she stalked the sidewalks on foot, her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanning relentlessly for infractions. A misplaced garden hose coiled improperly, lawn edges insufficiently crisp, recycle bins left out an hour too long. Nothing escaped her purview. But her particular obsession, a recurring theme in her crusade, was the installation of unapproved satellite dishes, which she viewed as metallic eyesores sullying the architectural harmony she fiercely defended. David Chun and his family, his wife Maria, and their 11-year-old son, Eli, had chosen Oak Ridge Estates for its promise: excellent schools, quiet streets, a sanctuary for raising a child. Their move was driven by the needs of Eli, a bright, inquisitive boy whose world had been plunged into darkness by a severe bout of meningitis in early childhood, leaving him completely blind. Eli navigated his world through an intricate map woven from sound, touch, and the remarkable piece of technology that was his constant companion. It was a sleek, modern Braille tablet, far removed from the clunky mechanical devices of the past. This marvel, a seamless fusion of a refreshable Braille display and smart tablet capabilities, was his portal. Through it, textbooks unfolded beneath his fingertips, emails arrived, the vast expanse of the internet became accessible, and connections with friends were maintained. It was more than a tool. It was an extension of his senses, as fundamental to his interaction with the world as sight was to others. David's career was in cybersecurity, a demanding field requiring intense focus and often bleeding into long, unpredictable hours protecting digital fortresses. Maria managed a local art gallery, her days filled with color, texture, and the quiet appreciation of human expression, a stark contrast to Janice's rigid worldview. They had already brushed against Janice's sphere of influence. A curt, formal warning had appeared in their mailbox regarding the visual clutter of Eli's brightly colored orientation cane, left leaning against the porch railing for a few moments one sunny afternoon. The interaction had been brief, impersonal, yet it left a residue of unease, a feeling of being watched, judged by standards that felt arbitrary and disproportionate. Janice's scrutiny felt less like community oversight and more like personal intrusion. Janice Pritchard harbored a deep, almost visceral suspicion of any technology she didn't fully comprehend, a category that encompassed nearly the entirety of the modern digital landscape. Wi-Fi signals were, in her mind, invisible tendrils of potential interference, possibly harmful. Smart home systems whispered of vulnerabilities, digital backdoors inviting unseen intrusions. She frequently held forth at HOA meetings, railing against the unregulated frequencies she imagined emanating from homes, a chaotic symphony of unseen waves disrupting her perceived order. Her pronouncements were often a bewildering tapestry woven from misused technical jargon and paranoid conjecture, yet her official title as treasurer lent her words a weight they scarcely deserved. She had, through sheer persistence and exploiting the apathy of some residents, successfully championed a notoriously vague bylaw. It required residents to register any external communication devices visible from the street, a rule so nebulously worded it served primarily as a source of constant friction and a tool for her arbitrary enforcement. Perhaps she'd seen one too many spy movies, or perhaps her fear masked something else entirely. On this particular Tuesday morning, the air hung heavy, promising a sweltering day. Eli sat on the low brick wall that bordered their front yard, a familiar perch while waiting for the school bus. The rough texture of the brick was cool beneath his legs. He could hear the distant drone of a lawnmower starting up, the chirping of sparrows in the oak tree overhead. His Braille tablet rested comfortably on his lap. His fingers danced across the grid of small, plastic pins, the tiny mechanisms rising and falling beneath his touch, forming the words of an adventure novel he was engrossed in. He was lost in a world of heroes and quests, the tactile language flowing directly into his imagination. The device emitted a low, almost imperceptible hum, the quiet breath of its complex inner workings, the only outward sign of the powerful technology contained within its slim casing. The distinct crunch of footsteps on the sidewalk gravel announced an arrival before the voice sliced through the morning calm. Sharp, commanding. "What is that thing, young man?" Eli jumped, startled, the fictional world dissolving instantly. He turned his head towards the sound, identifying the direction and, immediately, the speaker. "It's my Braille reader, Mrs. Pritchard," he explained, his voice polite, ingrained manners kicking in despite the sudden intrusion. "I use it for school and reading books." Janice Pritchard stepped closer, her shadow falling over him. He could smell the faint, sharp scent of her laundry detergent. She peered down at the device, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. It wasn't like the heavy, typewriter-like Perkins Braillers she vaguely recalled seeing in some pamphlet decades ago. This was slim, metallic, modern. Its surface was an intricate grid of tiny, moving white dots against a dark background. To Janice's untutored and deeply suspicious eyes, it looked complex, alien, futuristic, and therefore inherently threatening. "Braille reader?" she scoffed, the word laced with disbelief, dismissing his explanation outright. "That looks far too sophisticated for just reading. Are you accessing unauthorized networks? Broadcasting signals? We have strict rules about that, you know. Unregulated transmissions." "No, it just connects to our home Wi-Fi," Eli said, a knot of confusion tightening in his stomach. Her accusation felt bizarre, disconnected from reality. "It lets me read websites for homework and check my email. It's how I do my school assignments." He felt the need to justify its existence, its necessity. Websites? Email? Janice seized on these words, her paranoia igniting like dry tinder. The mention of online access confirmed her deepest fears about hidden activities. "That sounds like hacking to me. Intercepting neighborhood data packets? Is that what you're doing?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice into a conspiratorial whisper that felt more menacing than loud anger. Or maybe, her eyes darted around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Is this some kind of coded transmission device? Like those drug dealers use? Sending secret messages right here on our street?" The sheer absurdity of the accusation was utterly lost on Janice. In her mind, fueled by a potent cocktail of ignorance and suspicion, Eli's sophisticated tool was not an aid, but a weapon. It was confirmation of her anxieties about unregulated technology falling into the wrong hands, which, to her, meant anyone's hands but her own. She saw not a child reading, but a potential threat operating under the guise of disability. Eli clutched the tablet tighter, the smooth, cool casing suddenly feeling fragile under his grip. He knew it was expensive, a highly specialized piece of equipment provided through insurance and supplemental aid programs. It was his lifeline to learning, to independence. "No, it's not," he protested, his voice trembling slightly. "It's just for me to read. That's all. Please, Mrs. Pritchard." Fear, cold and sharp, tightened his throat. He could sense the escalation in her, the familiar, terrifying wave of adult irrationality cresting over him. Irrationality he couldn't see but could feel in the tension radiating from her, in the strained pitch of her voice. "Don't you lie to me." Janice's voice snapped, rising in volume, sharp and brittle as shattering glass. Her control finally fractured. "I know suspicious technology when I see it. You are in clear violation of HOA Bylaws Article 7, Section 4B, and possibly federal communication laws. Hand that device over. Immediately." "No." The word tore from Eli's throat, pure instinct overriding fear. He pulled the tablet protectively against his chest. It's mine. I need it. You can't take it. His defiance, his refusal to submit to her self-proclaimed authority, his desperate protection of his essential tool, it was the final catalyst. Years of simmering resentment towards perceived slights, a lifetime of feeling overlooked or undervalued, an unshakable, self-righteous belief in her own judgment. It all coalesced in that moment. An invisible dam within her burst, unleashing a surge of sudden, shocking violence. She lunged forward with surprising speed and strength, her hand clamping down hard on the Braille tablet. She wrenched it from Eli's grasp with a force that sent him stumbling backward off the low brick wall, landing hard on the grass verge. Eli cried out, a sharp sound of pain and disbelief. This is unapproved contraband. Janice shrieked, her voice high and strained. She held the sleek device aloft for a triumphant, terrible moment, like a captured enemy standard. Then, with a grunt of furious effort, fueled by adrenaline and misguided conviction, she hurled the Braille tablet down onto the unforgiving concrete sidewalk. The impact was sickeningly final. A sharp crack echoed in the still morning air. Black plastic shattered, spraying outwards. The specialized screen, the heart of the device with its delicate array of refreshable Braille pins, fractured into a spiderweb of cracks. Small electronic components, capacitors, resistors, chips, skittered across the pavement like metallic insects. The low, steady hum Eli associated with connection and knowledge abruptly died. Silence. Eli let out a choked cry of distress, tears instantly springing to his eyes, hot and stinging. The destruction felt like a physical blow, a visceral severing. It wasn't just plastic and wires. It was his access, his independence, his connection to the world beyond sound and touch, shattered on the sidewalk. He felt a wave of nausea, the world tilting dizzily. He could hear the sharp intake of breath from somewhere nearby, a neighbor witnessing the event. Before the full weight of her actions could penetrate her self-righteous fury, Janice fumbled in her pocket for her cell phone. Her hands were shaking. "I'm calling the police," she announced, her voice trembling now, a strange mix of adrenaline, fear, and lingering self-importance. "Reporting suspicious activity, potential network intrusion, hacking, and a non-compliant juvenile resisting HOA authority." She stabbed at the screen, dialing 911. Her voice, when she spoke to the dispatcher, was high-pitched, breathless, painting a wildly distorted picture. A suspicious individual using an advanced electronic device for potentially illicit purposes, her own brave intervention to secure the community. She portrayed Eli as a potential cyber threat, herself as a vigilant citizen acting decisively in the face of danger. David Chun was in his home office, trying to focus on a complex firewall analysis, the window overlooking the front yard offering a sliver of morning light. The sudden sharp voices, Eli's cry, the sickening crack, it all pierced his concentration like an alarm. He looked up, his blood running cold. He saw Eli huddled on the grass verge, tears streaming down his face. He saw Janice Pritchard standing over him, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. And he saw the scattered, broken remains of Eli's Braille tablet littering the sidewalk. A wave of cold dread washed over him, instantly consumed by a surge of white-hot, protective fury. He bolted from his chair, knocking it over in his haste. He flew down the stairs and wrenched open the front door just as Maria rushed out from the kitchen, alerted by the commotion. They reached Eli simultaneously, dropping to their knees beside him. "Eli, are you okay? Honey, what happened?" Maria's voice was tight with panic, her hands hovering over him, checking for injury. David's eyes locked onto the destroyed device, the anger churning in his gut. "Eli, talk to us. What did she do?" Eli, sobbing, struggled to explain between gasps, pointing a trembling finger at Janice, who was still deep in her dramatic performance for the 911 dispatcher. She said, hacking. "She took it, smashed it." The wail of an approaching siren grew louder, adding another layer of surreal nightmare to the scene. A police cruiser pulled up to the curb moments later, its lights flashing silently in the bright morning sun. Two officers emerged, their faces etched with professional neutrality, but their eyes held a hint of perplexity. They were clearly trying to reconcile the dispatcher's garbled report of hacking and suspicious device with the tableau before them. A distraught, visually impaired child, his anxious parents, a middle-aged woman still on the phone, raving about coded messages and unauthorized frequencies, and the obvious wreckage of what looked like some kind of tablet. Janice, abruptly ending her call with a flourish, immediately launched into her narrative, intercepting the officers before they could reach the Chens. She gestured dramatically at the broken Braille reader. "Officers, thank goodness you're here." This young man was operating an unauthorized electronic device, likely attempting to infiltrate local networks. He refused to comply when I identified the violation. "This device," she pointed a shaking finger at the debris, "is evidence." David forced himself to take a deep, calming breath, pushing down the rage. He needed to be clear, precise. He stood up slowly and stepped forward, positioning himself protectively in front of Eli. "Officers," he began, his voice low but steady, resonant with controlled anger. "My name is David Chun. This is my wife, Maria. And this is our son, Eli." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Eli is blind. That device," he pointed unequivocally to the wreckage on the sidewalk, "was his Braille tablet. It is essential assistive technology. It's how he reads his textbooks, does his schoolwork, communicates. It's his connection to the world." He turned his gaze directly to Janice, his eyes hard. "This woman," he stated clearly, indicating Janice, "accused our 11-year-old blind son of hacking." She then forcibly grabbed the device from his hands, causing him to fall, and deliberately, violently, smashed it on the ground. Just then, the Patels, their quiet, unassuming neighbors from across the street, hesitantly emerged from their front door. Mr. Patel, a software engineer who usually kept to himself, approached the officers, his wife hovering nervously behind him. "Excuse me, officers," Mr. Patel said quietly but firmly. "We saw the whole thing. From our window." He nodded towards his house. The boy, Eli, he was just sitting there quietly, reading his machine. Mrs. Pritchard came over, started yelling at him, accusing him of things. Then she grabbed it from him and threw it down. "Broke it." Mrs. Patel nodded silent agreement, her eyes wide. The two officers exchanged a long, meaningful glance. The tenor of the situation shifted palpably. Their posture towards Janice cooled, their expressions hardening from neutral assessment to serious concern. One officer knelt beside Eli, speaking softly, asking if he was hurt. The other began taking detailed statements, carefully documenting David's account, Mr. Patel's testimony, and the physical evidence, the shattered tablet. They spoke sternly with Janice, cautioning her severely about the potential consequences of making false police reports, destruction of property, and possible assault charges, especially given the victim was a minor with a disability. However, mindful of the often tangled legalities surrounding HOA disputes and neighborhood conflicts, and faced with Janice's sputtering insistence that she was merely enforcing documented community rules about unregistered external devices, they didn't make an arrest on the spot. Standard procedure in such cases often involved compiling a thorough report for the prosecutor's office to review for potential charges. Visibly shaken now by the direct police admonishment and the neighbor's corroborating testimony, her self-righteous bluster deflating, Janice Pritchard retreated wordlessly into the sanctuary of her own meticulously kept house, the door clicking shut behind her. As the police cruiser pulled away, leaving an unnerving quiet in its wake, David knelt again on the sidewalk. His hands, usually navigating complex digital systems, moved with surprising gentleness as he carefully gathered the larger broken pieces of the Braille tablet. The anger still simmered, a low burn beneath the surface, but his actions were methodical. He recognized the specific model, the casing material, the layout of the now damaged Braille cells, the familiar ports. His fingers traced the jagged edges of the largest fragment of the back casing. There, etched into the plastic, partially obscured but legible, was a serial number. S/N, BRX7, K4G. He instantly recognized its significance. He pulled out his smartphone, his movements precise, documenting everything. Close-ups of the damage, the scattered components, the surrounding area, and several clear shots of the partial serial number. Back inside their house, while Maria comforted Eli, settling him on the sofa with a cool drink and speaking in low, soothing tones, David bypassed the living room and went straight to his secure home office. The suburban drama had just intersected with his professional world in a way he could never have anticipated. David Chen wasn't just a guy who worked in cybersecurity. He was Supervisory Special Agent David Chen, field leader of a specialized cybercrime division task force within the Federal Bureau of Investigation. His team didn't chase petty scammers. They hunted international hacking collectives, dismantled dark web marketplaces peddling illegal goods and data, investigated sophisticated corporate espionage, and tracked the digital ghosts of terrorists and nation-state actors. Dealing with a neighborhood HOA tyrant was absurdly outside his usual purview. But Janice Pritchard had just assaulted his son and destroyed vital assistive technology. She had made it deeply personal. And in her blind technological ignorance and rage, she might have left a digital breadcrumb trail leading somewhere far darker than HOA violations. Logging into his secure FBI workstation, bypassing the standard civilian internet entirely, David accessed the layered network of restricted federal and agency-specific databases. He typed in the partial serial number, BRX7K4G. He initiated a search query, not just against standard stolen property registries like NCAC, but cross-referencing against specialized databases tracking high-value medical equipment, assistive technology distribution manifests, insurance claim reports for bulk losses, and known patterns in cargo theft. He didn't have to wait long. A hit flagged almost immediately. A positive match. The serial number fragment BRX7K4G belonged to a specific batch of advanced Braille tablets. Model number, manufacturing lot, everything matched. The entire batch, several dozen units valued at thousands of dollars each, had been reported stolen 6 months prior during a targeted warehouse burglary in a neighboring state. The manifest confirmed the original destination for that specific shipment, a well-respected regional center providing technology and training for the visually impaired. Eli's tablet, the one David and Maria had painstakingly researched and purchased secondhand several weeks after the reported theft date, from what had appeared to be a reputable, albeit small-scale, online seller specializing in refurbished assistive tech, was confirmed stolen property. A cold certainty began to crystallize in David's mind, chilling him despite the simmering anger. This wasn't just about assault. It wasn't just destruction of property. It wasn't just Janice's bizarre, technologically ignorant paranoia about Wi-Fi signals and coded messages. Why that specific device? Why the immediate, violent escalation? Could Janice's obsessive fear of external technology, her railing against unauthorized devices, be something more than neurosis? Could it be a clumsy, subconscious attempt to project her own hidden activities to deflect scrutiny? Could she, somehow, be connected to the stolen batch? The thought seemed outlandish, yet the circumstances were too specific, too violent, to dismiss. Adhering strictly to Bureau protocol, meticulously documenting every step, David immediately notified his direct supervisor, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, ASAC, Thorne, outlining the situation, the assault, the destroyed device, the stolen property match, the potential implications. He formally requested authorization to open a preliminary inquiry, emphasizing the need to maintain professional boundaries despite the deeply personal connection to the initiating incident. Thorne, recognizing the gravity and the unusual circumstances, gave him the green light. David assembled a small, trusted team within his unit. Agent Riley, his sharpest analyst with an uncanny ability to see patterns in chaotic data. Tech specialist Quan, a wizard at navigating the dark corners of the internet and unraveling digital obfuscation. Their initial task, investigate the theft of the Braille tablet batch, FBI case file #CT 8817, and trace the subsequent movement and sale of the stolen devices, starting with the online seller who had sold the specific tablet, S/N, BRX7, K4G812, now confirmed, to the Chin family. The digital breadcrumb trail began on a small, professional-looking website hosted on a shared server. The seller account, Access Tech Restored, had positive reviews, detailed descriptions, and seemingly legitimate contact information. But the first subpoena, served electronically to the web host and the payment processor used by the site, revealed the initial layers of deliberate obfuscation. The registered owner was a shell corporation linked to a mail drop address. The payment processor account was registered under a synthetic identity, a fabricated persona built from stolen and fabricated data points. Quan began peeling back the layers, analyzing server logs from the web host, cross-referencing IP addresses used to manage the seller account against known VPN providers and TOR exit nodes. Riley started digging into the financial flow. Initial transactions were often small, routed through peer-to-peer payment apps or prepaid debit cards, designed to appear legitimate. But larger sums, likely from bulk sales, quickly moved into the murky world of cryptocurrency. "Got something, boss," Quan announced one afternoon, pointing at her monitor. The seller account admin logins. Mostly VPNs, rotating IPs across Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. Standard misdirection. But look at these timestamps. She highlighted several login sessions occurring late at night, Pacific time. And these specific IP blocks, they aren't commercial VPNs. They resolve back to residential ISPs. One block, used consistently for about 3 weeks during the period Eli's tablet was listed, resolves to, wait for it, Oak Ridge, California. David felt a jolt, the confirmation hitting him harder than he expected. "Can you narrow it down?" "Working on it," Quan replied, fingers flying across her keyboard. Cross-referencing with known subscribers in that block requires another warrant for the ISP records, but based on timing and frequency. Meanwhile, Riley was deep in the blockchain. The crypto wallet address associated with the Access Tech restored payouts received multiple transfers, she explained, pulling up a complex visualization of transaction flows. Bitcoin mostly. They used a mixer service here, she pointed, to try and tumble the coins, break the chain. But the outputs, several large withdrawals went through a specific account on a mid-tier crypto exchange platform. Not one of the big ones, maybe trying to stay under the radar. Another federal subpoena, this one directed at the cryptocurrency exchange, demanding Know Your Customer, KYC, information and access logs associated with the flagged account. The exchange, after verifying the warrant's validity, complied. The KYC data was, again, suspect, likely another synthetic identity or borrowed credentials. But the access logs, they contained IP addresses. IP addresses used to log in, check balances, initiate withdrawals. "Bingo," Quan said quietly, looking up from her screen, her expression grim. "Ran the access logs from the exchange against the ISP subscriber data we just got back. Multiple logins to that crypto exchange account, originating from the same residential IP address in Oak Ridge that accessed the seller website admin panel." She paused, meeting David's gaze. "The IP address is registered to Janice Pritchard. 14, Willow Lane, Oak Ridge Estates." The pieces slammed into place with sickening clarity. Janice wasn't just an HOA tyrant enforcing petty rules with irrational zeal. She was a node, perhaps a crucial local hub, in a multi-state trafficking ring specializing in stolen high-value medical and assistive technology. Her carefully cultivated image, the slightly eccentric, overly zealous, but ultimately harmless neighborhood watchdog, was the perfect cover. She likely received shipments of stolen goods, stored them discreetly within her immaculately maintained home, and then used her rudimentary understanding of online anonymity, likely gleaned from her co-conspirators, to list and sell them through front accounts like Access Tech Restored. Her obsessive policing of neighborhood technology, her paranoia about unauthorized frequencies and hacking, wasn't just random technophobia. It was, in part, a twisted form of operational security. She was trying to control the technological environment around her, perhaps subconsciously scanning for anything or anyone that might detect her own illicit digital activities. Her violent, disproportionate reaction to Eli's legitimate Braille tablet likely stemmed from a panicked confluence of factors. The shock of seeing a device so similar to the stolen one she handled, the fear that its sophisticated nature could somehow expose her, amplified by her existing prejudice, and the sudden, terrifying prospect of discovery right on her doorstep. It was a primal act of self-preservation fueled by guilt and terror. The investigation rapidly expanded. David's team, now working in coordination with FBI field offices in the states where the warehouse burglary and other related thefts occurred, plus the Bureau's Financial Crimes Unit and the ATF, due to the interstate trafficking aspect, began building an airtight case. They unearthed further digital evidence, recovered fragments of encrypted communications between Janice and other suspected ring members discussing shipments and payments, using coded language that was easily deciphered. Financial analysis linking Janice's personal bank accounts to deposits originating from the crypto exchange withdrawals. Server logs showing her IP accessing specific dark web forums known for trading stolen electronics. The digital footprint she thought she was covering was, under expert scrutiny, clear and damning. Armed with irrefutable digital evidence, corroborated by physical surveillance that documented suspicious deliveries to Janice's home, the FBI secured a comprehensive federal search and arrest warrant. The raid on 14 Willow Lane happened early one morning, a stark contrast to the suburban quiet Janice so fiercely tried to maintain. FBI agents, clad in tactical vests, moved with quiet efficiency. The meticulously kept house, with its neatly arranged HOA newsletters and perfectly balanced budget printouts on the desk, yielded its secrets. Behind the facade of mundane order, hidden in nondescript plastic storage bins in the basement, agents found them. Several more stolen Braille tablets, still in their original packaging, specialized speech-generating devices, high-end cochlear implant processors, boxes of expensive hearing aids. They also recovered shipping materials, bubble wrap, prepaid postage labels, crudely coded ledgers documenting sales and inventory, and several burner phones presumably used for coordinating with the wider trafficking ring. Janice Pritchard was apprehended in her kitchen, midway through brewing her morning tea. The transformation was staggering. The sharp features, usually pursed in judgment, went slack with disbelief. The self-righteous indignation that defined her public persona evaporated instantly, replaced by a wide-eyed, gaping incomprehension as federal agents informed her she was under arrest and read her Miranda rights. The clicking sound of the handcuffs seemed to echo in the sudden, heavy silence of her perfect suburban home. The federal indictment handed down was comprehensive, reflecting the scope and seriousness of her crimes. Interstate transportation of stolen property, specifically targeting medical/assistive technology, triggering enhanced penalty considerations, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud and trafficking. And stemming directly from the incident that started it all, a charge of assault on a child with a disability, now elevated to federal jurisdiction due to its direct connection with the larger criminal enterprise investigated by the FBI. News of Janice Pritchard's arrest sent shockwaves through Oak Ridge Estates. Neighbors gathered in hushed groups on sidewalks, struggling to reconcile the image of the petty, rule-obsessed HOA treasurer, the woman who measured lawn height and monitored recycling bin placement, with the reality of a federal indictment describing a sophisticated criminal involved in a heartless trafficking ring that preyed specifically on the needs of the disabled community. The story quickly gained national attention, becoming a cautionary tale about the vulnerability of supply chains for essential assistive technology and a stark reminder that serious crime could fester behind the most unassuming suburban facades. Given the overwhelming weight of the digital and physical evidence, the seriousness of the charges, and her central role in the trafficking operation, Janice Pritchard was deemed a flight risk and denied bail. Facing the prospect of spending decades in federal prison, her defiance crumbled completely. She eventually entered into a plea agreement, pleading guilty to the primary counts of interstate trafficking of stolen goods, wire fraud, and the assault charge related to Eli. During her sentencing hearing, the federal judge delivered a scathing rebuke that went far beyond the financial mechanics of her crimes. He focused on the profound moral depravity inherent in her actions. "You didn't just steal equipment, Mrs. Pritchard," the judge stated, his voice cold and devoid of sympathy, fixing her with a hard stare. "You exploited vulnerability. You stole opportunity. You stole dignity. You profited from the theft of devices that provide independence, communication, education, and connection for individuals facing significant challenges. And you did so while hypocritically, violently, terrorizing a child who relied on the very type of technology you were trafficking. Your actions demonstrate not just a disregard for the law, but a chilling lack of empathy and a profound disrespect for basic human decency." Janice Pritchard, former HOA treasurer, was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. As part of the judgment, federal asset forfeiture proceedings were initiated. All assets traced back to her criminal activities, including her house and Oak Ridge estates. Funds seized from multiple bank and investment accounts linked to the illicit proceeds were confiscated. The recovered funds were earmarked for restitution, primarily directed towards the manufacturers and distributors whose warehouses had been targeted, and, significantly, a substantial portion was allocated to a fund supporting nonprofit organizations that provided assistive technology grants to individuals and families in need. In the aftermath, Oak Ridge Estates began a slow process of healing and recalibration. The HOA underwent a significant overhaul. The vague, intrusive bylaws regarding technology, Janice's pet project, were summarily scrapped and replaced with clear, common-sense guidelines focused on genuine community well-being rather than arbitrary compliance. A new board was elected, composed of residents committed to fostering communication and mutual respect. The Patels, no longer feeling intimidated, started attending neighborhood potlucks and became more active voices in community decisions. The shadow of Karen had lifted. A few weeks after the sentencing, a securely packed box arrived at the Chun residence. It bore the logo of a well-known assistive technology manufacturer. Inside, nestled in protective foam, was a brand-new, top-of-the-line Braille tablet, the latest model, faster, lighter, with enhanced features. It had been purchased using funds specifically allocated from the court-ordered restitution pool established after Janice's conviction. David and Maria watched, their hearts full, as Eli carefully unboxed it. His fingers, sensitive and sure, explored the smooth, cool casing, traced the familiar layout of the Perkins-style keys, and brushed across the fresh grid of Braille pins. He plugged it in, connected it effortlessly to their home Wi-Fi network. His face, tense with anticipation moments before, broke into a wide, luminous smile as the device came alive beneath his touch, the familiar low hum returning, the pins cycling through a welcome message in crisp Braille. On a laptop nearby, David had briefly pulled up a news article summarizing the conclusion of Janice Pritchard's case, the final legal chapter closed. But Eli wasn't interested in the news of her fate. He was already completely absorbed, his fingers flying across the keys, eagerly downloading his favorite adventure novels and checking messages from his friends. David looked at his son, not seeing a victim defined by trauma, but a resilient young man reclaiming his world, reconnecting his links. The burning anger he had felt on that terrible morning had cooled, replaced by a profound, quiet sense of justice served, not through vengeance, but through the meticulous, relentless application of the very skills he used every day to combat unseen threats. The complex digital trail Janice thought she had expertly hidden, the technology she had both feared and exploited, had ultimately become the instrument of her undoing. In the peaceful quiet of their living room, the dominant sound was the faint, familiar, comforting hum of Eli's new Braille tablet. It was a sound of connection restored, of barriers overcome, of a future reclaimed from the wreckage of ignorance and greed. Oak Ridge Estates, free from the reign of its self-appointed watchdog, was finding its way back to being simply a neighborhood, perhaps a little wiser, and hopefully, a lot more compassionate.